touched upon this a little bit earlier in terms of the time that it was taking the Immigration Department to finalise applications for employment visas under the General Employment Policy and also the Admission Scheme for Mainland Talents and Professionals. But there's also another visa type that applies under the General Employment Policy, and it is the Business Investment Visa as an entrepreneur. And this is the visa that you apply for if you are seeking to establish a new business in Hong Kong, or you wish to join in an existing business in Hong Kong as a partner or as an investor. Now, it has been legion in Hong Kong for years and years and years and years that in order to get an investment visa as an entrepreneur approved, it's a 4 to 6 month process, which is a very, very long time for a visa type such as this to be in play, given that, you know, when you're building a business, you need to move fast and get things sorted. So whilst the Immigration Department have proven to be flexible historically in something called the Catch-22, and that's where if you're here as a visitor and you've taken steps to establish a business in Hong Kong and you've filed an application under the General Employment Policy for an entrepreneur visa, then as long as you've had an active application in the system, the way that the Immigration Department consider the approvability criteria for that visa, which is substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong, what they would do is, even though it was going to take 4 to 6 months for this case to finalise, they would close their eyes to you engaging in activities as a visitor, which technically speaking was a breach of your conditions of stay as a visitor, because as a visitor you're not allowed to take up employment or join in or establish a business. But the irony is, in order to prove that you can make a substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong, the Immigration Department are asking you questions that necessarily, to answer them positively, mean that you have to engage in activities that are not commensurate with your conditions of stay as a visitor. So you have to open an office, you have to hire people, you have to show that, you know, you've got potential revenues in play, which means that you've started trading and issuing invoices. So the Immigration Department have always closed their eyes to any perceived breach of conditions of stay if you're applying for this visa and you're here as a visitor, but only if you've got an active application in the system. If you don't have an active application in the system, then as far as the Immigration Department is concerned, they can't impute your state of mind in relation to complying with immigration law here, and so you're at risk for prosecution for breach of conditions of stay if you started a business but you don't have an application in the system. So clearly, because it takes 4 to 6 months for the Immigration Department to finalise these applications, and the Immigration Department have criticised them for the amount of time that it's been taking, and so you see now the Immigration Department are moving a lot faster on applications. They say that 90% of applications should be finalised within 4 weeks, but actually what we're discovering is that these applications are not going to get finalised in 4 weeks per se. What will happen is that within a couple of weeks after filing your application, you get a laundry list from the Immigration Department that's this long, and it's kind of like they've had a really good look at it and they're now asking for every possible thing that they think that they might need between now and them finalising the application, so that you give an opportunity to give it to them quickly, so that they in turn can then finalise their commitment under this visa program as quickly as possible. So the way that we're seeing this being implemented is that it takes a couple of weeks to get the first request for further and better particulars, and instead of there being 3 or 4 items on the list, there's now 20 items on the list. Any questions on that one? Great stuff. Yeah.
Is there a minimum investment that you need to bring into the business?
The Immigration Department don't prescribe any particular minimums. Some jurisdictions like Australia may have a 250,000 Australian dollar investment, or in the US 500,000 US, or what have you. No, they're not prescriptive, but you have to, in my experience, if you're here as a visitor or a non-resident seeking to apply under this program, you need to have $1 million Hong Kong available to you. by the time they've finalised your application, you need to have expended some of that ahead of your approval, demonstrating that you're creating the new facts on the ground in anticipation of your approval, where you can go whole hog afterwards. So you need to start with $1 million, and if you've got $500,000 left over by the time they've said yes to your visa application, then normally that sort of puts the money piece to bed. However, if you're an existing resident, the monetary requirement, in my experience, is halved, and that's because the Immigration Department give existing residents, say, who've been here for a couple of years holding an employment visa, who's sick and tired of working for other people, and they've made the decision that they want to work for themselves. They believe that the time spent in Hong Kong has given them a kind of an understanding of how Hong Kong ticks, and that the likelihood of you being successful in your application is probably increased. In your business. Your likelihood of being successful in your business is probably increased compared to someone who doesn't have any formal experience in Hong Kong. And also, because you're an existing resident, the Immigration Department don't want to pull the rug from under your feet. So an application that might not get approved if you're here as a visitor might get approved if you're here as an existing resident. So there are advantages if you're applying for an investment visa as an entrepreneur to be an existing resident when you make your application. And certainly in terms of the numbers, 500,000 Hong Kong dollars does it clearly, in my experience.
So you mean 500,000 Hong Kong dollar to be spent into the business, or to say 500,000 Hong Kong dollar just as a backup sum for
Yeah.
the business?
It's a capital pool that is clearly available to the business to allow you to implement your plan. But if you've got a business plan that calls for $10 million worth of capital and you've only got $500,000, and then you're suggesting you're going to raise the rest, you have to have a little bit more visibility on the balance, yeah.
How about the startup stream?
Well, the startup visa is actually not a visa. The startup visa is the Immigration Department's response to a public consultation exercise that occurred about 2 years ago, which led to something called the enhancement measures to the General Employment Policy, which were introduced on May the 5th, 2015. And the startup visa is essentially the following. If you are a researcher for a business, or a promoter for a business, or a founder for a business, and you don't meet all the normal criteria for a business investment visa as an entrepreneur, then what you can do is you can make an application to one of 6 accredited programs that are accredited by the government, that are accelerator type programs. Invest HK's program, for example. Cyberport has a program. Science Parks has a program. Now, if you don't meet the normal criteria for approval as an entrepreneur, then you truck along to one of these places and you put an application in to see if you can get accepted onto one of these programs. If you can pass the due diligence requirement and persuade the admission committees that your business idea is of such merit that they're prepared to accept you onto the program, give you some free money, give you mentoring, give you a roof over your head and everything else that you need, then as far as the Immigration Department are concerned, that is good enough for them. So, when you make your application for a startup visa, what you're doing is you're preparing all the paperwork that's needed for the entrepreneur visa, knowing that it's not good enough, knowing that you haven't got enough money, knowing that you're not going to create any jobs in the first year, and the like. But that doesn't matter, because if you've been accepted on the program, you include a copy of your acceptance letter into your application bundle, tick a box on the page 3 of the application form, ID 999A, and then they will favourably consider your application, and they usually approve it within 4 weeks. So the startup visa is a bit of a misnomer, because actually it's not a visa per se, it's a process you go through to get accepted onto one of these accredited programs. Point of acceptance, you get your ticket to ride, put your application paperwork in that normally would fail. They ignore the failings in the application. They go, right, they've been accepted, due diligence confirmed, you get your visa 2 years. Okay? Yeah. Hi.
Is this applicable to Chinese citizen?
For the admission scheme for mainland talents, and
No, for investor.
let me go back. Okay, Chinese nationals can't apply under this program unless they have lived outside of China for at least 12 months immediately before applying, or they hold permanent residency in another jurisdiction. If you hold permanent residency in another jurisdiction, then you can make an application. You're eligible for consideration. Now, you may or may not be aware that over the last 15 years or so, there's been a complete industry that emerged globally to sell permanent residency visas to mainland Chinese for about 150,000 Hong Kong dollars, where you could get permanent residency overnight, like the Gambia, for example, or Vanuatu, or Guinea-Bissau. And the reason why this market emerged was that, as you'll see under the next program, the Capital Investment Entrance Scheme. If you were Chinese and you wanted to lend 10 million Hong Kong dollars to Hong Kong for 7 years, and you came from a decent family and there was no security objection to you being granted a visa under the Capital Investment Entrance Scheme in those circumstances, you could apply for that type of visa so long as you had permanent residency in another country. When the Immigration Department originally conceived this program, they thought it would be for Chinese that have migrated from Hong Kong, from China, that moved to Canada or to Australia or to the US or Europe or wherever, and that then wanted to come back to Mother China and be based in Hong Kong. Although 7 or 8 years into the program, some enterprising people in Macau, it was, where it all started out, realized that a program that had existed on the books, certainly in Gambia, prior to the handover, was still actually on the books in Gambia. Because prior to the handover, we had something called the brain drain. And that was where all the local Chinese families were looking for somewhere to escape to. Those that were wealthy enough were able to get off to all the first world jurisdictions and were able to organize their affairs. But people who were less wealthy could come up with a sum of money and get themselves a bolt hole to go to, which was Gambia, for example. Just in case the tanks came rolling down Nathan Road and Hong Kong was going to go to hell in a handbasket, people would escape somewhere, they'd have somewhere to go and live. So anyway, Gambia was still on the books. And so the principals that had control of that Gambia program, who were based in Macau, were able to reinvigorate it, and then they used, certain immigration consultants used the fact of a Gambia PR as part of a Capital Investment Entrance Scheme application, and lo and behold, it worked. And so that then opened the floodgates to the point where prior to January last year, when the Capital Investment Entrance Scheme program was suspended, there were 24,000 approvals under that visa type, 22,000 of which all came from the mainland. And understanding that this program was never designed originally for mainlanders to participate in it because of capital control issues about the current account between Hong Kong and China and being able to take money out of China to fund participation in this program. Essentially, it was completely hijacked by the Chinese who were using these Mickey Mouse jurisdictions as part and parcel of the application process. And when they postponed it or cancelled it in January of 2015, there were still 20,000 applications in the pipeline. So it takes between 3 and 4 years for those backlog cases to get finalised, and they're still working way through the process. Now, I've got 2 clients that have been in the process for 2.5 years already, and there's still no hope in sight on that one. So just to tie that back to the scenario, if you're a Chinese national and you hold permanent residency in Gambia or Guinea-Bissau and you want to apply for a business investment visa, yes, you're conceptually eligible to apply, but the Immigration Department will look really, really closely at those applications. And essentially, if you are going to commit 10 million Hong Kong dollars investment into your business and create an army of jobs and build up a really big business under this particular visa type, then yes, you could go up with a Mickey Mouse jurisdiction and expect to get taken seriously. But if you just want to do the bare minimum and rely on your Gambia PR to access the program, they're not going to approve you, in my experience. Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay. Great. Good.
One question.
Yeah.
So under this program, the investment program, what are the conditions of staying? So the general employment for employee, the condition to stay in your employment contract.
You have, yeah. To get the visa approved, you have to show that you can make a substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong, which means firstly you need a good story. Secondly, you need to have in your plan a clear pathway to the creation of local employment opportunities. One-man businesses don't get approved. You need to show you've got a properly set up office. WYND is a perfect arrangement to satisfy that criteria. You can't run your business from your kitchen table or your spare bedroom and make the argument, well, rents are so expensive here and I've got no need for an office. Doesn't work. You need to have a properly set up office. And then you need also resources, funding resources and non-funding resources. Funding resources, as I mentioned earlier, $1 million Hong Kong dollars. If an existing resident, $500,000 usually does it. The non-funding resources are all the kinds of things that you have at play and present in your opportunity that's giving you the confidence to make this investment in Hong Kong in the first place. So it could be you've got an MVP that you want to commercialise, it could be that you've got some IP that's proven successful elsewhere and you want to bring it to Hong Kong, deploy it here, expect it to be successful. Could be work in progress, clients that you've already got, contracts in play, revenues you've already earned. Immigration Department are looking for sustainability. They want to see if you've got revenues planned, what's the quality of those revenues in addition to the sum that you're expecting to bring in. Clearly, if you've got revenues accruing and you perhaps don't have $1 million, you've got a little bit less than $1 million, then the revenues that are coming through, a portion of which has got profits attached to it, that can be sort of factored into the mix in terms of the funding of the business. So getting the approval is substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong. If you get a slam dunk approval, which means they love the story, they like what's going on, everything's tickety-boo, they'll give you a 2-year limit of stay. That then gives you the 2 years that you need, and in order to get your next extension, at the 2-year mark, you have to demonstrate in a superficial way that you continue to make a substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong. And one of the, as a result of the Audit Commission report, the Immigration Department now must routinely ask at the point of extension, how much capital did you invest in the first year? How much capital are you going to invest in the next 2 years? How many jobs did you create in the first year? How many jobs are you going to create in the next 2 or 3 years? So the Immigration Department are going through a data gathering exercise as part and parcel of the extension process at 2 years. On the other hand, if the Immigration Department don't want to deny you, but they think there's enough going on to warrant an approval, but not a full 2 years, what they'll do is they'll give you a 1-year limit of stay initially, and then they'll subject you to business review at the end of that first year to see if in fact you are making a substantial contribution to the economy of Hong Kong. So they'll then go through everything that's gone on in the prior 12 months and look to see, okay, is this business doing what it said it would do? If it's doing what it said it would do, you'll then probably get a 3-year extension. If it's not doing what you said it would do, and this in this regard specifically local jobs, because the economy is poor at the moment, then they will undoubtedly not give you 3 years. They'll give you another year, and then they'll subject your business review again at the end of their exercise. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is that as long as you've clearly sought to move the business forward in that period of time, you haven't just been sitting around painting pictures of the harbour or hanging outside, the old Vic or whatever it's called in Wan Chai drinking beer all day, every day. If you've clearly tried to move your business forward, they won't penalise you by pulling the rug from under your feet saying, no, we don't think you've done enough. They'll give you another year, but they'll subject you to business review again at the end of that first year. So the key is to get approved initially. Once you get approved initially, mostly if the business is happening, you can manage your continuing residency all the way through to 7 years. And I've seen some, not my clients per se, although I've done right of abode applications for them, but what they've done 7 years earlier, they got an investment visa approved, and then they haven't created any jobs, and they've marginally moved the business forward year after year, but they've had an argument with the Immigration Department, and then year after year after year, they got approved for another year. So after 7 years, they're now at the point where they can make an application for the right of abode, which is, great for those people who've gone through it. But being an immigration professional, I can tell you, I would not want to have to, live my life knowing that 10 months into I've got to go through that process all over again and not know whether I'm going to get extended next time. It's like the sword of Damocles hanging over your head, Okay. Any questions?
So, sorry, so the maximum you can get is what, 3 years at a time?
The way it works now, since May last year, is 2 years, 3 years, 3 years. It used to be 1, 2, 2, 3. The enhancement measures changed the way that limits of stay are granted, making it less traumatic to have to deal with the immigration department on an ongoing basis. But still, if you've got a marginal business, they're not going to put you onto that track. They're going to put you on 1 year initially, and then keep you on a short leash until you've demonstrated that the business has gained traction. It's delivering on the initial promise inherent in the papers that led to the approval in the first place.